Imagine you're watching what, by all accounts, should be the sporting event of the decade. I mean, it is the 2026 World Cup semifinal.
Oh, massive stakes.
Huge stakes.
Yeah.
You're sitting in a packed, just sweltering stadium in Arlington, Texas.
Texas in July. Yeah, you can just imagine the heat.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
But it's not just the heat, it's the energy.
Yeah.
The energy in the building is absolutely electric. It's that kind of nervous tension you can, actually feel sitting heavy in your chest.
Oh, absolutely. The anticipation is just off the charts.
Because on one side of the pitch, you have France. And we need to be clear here. This isn't just a good French team. This is a terrifying offensive juggernaut.
Yeah, juggernaut is the right word.
We are talking about a squad that had just blasted through the tournament, scoring an unbelievable 16 goals in their previous 6 matches.
16 goals. I mean, they were the undisputed heavy favorites. When you look at their roster on paper, it's a team that is practically overflowing with generational talent.
Right, guys who can change a game in a second.
Exactly. The whole squad was built entirely to overwhelm you with just pure speed and power.
And then, on the other side, you have Spain, a squad that operates completely differently. They are precise. They are methodical.
Very calculated.
Yes, calculated. And they are desperate to reach only their second ever World Cup final since they won the whole thing back in 2010. So you are sitting there as a fan expecting this ultimate clash of the Titans.
You're waiting for a fireworks display.
Exactly, an incredible back-and-forth track meet.
Which makes what actually unfolded on that pitch so shocking, because that expected clash of titans, it never materialized.
It really didn't. And that is exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we aren't just reading you a basic match recap or, just telling you who scored. Our mission here is to deconstruct how a massive, heavy favorite completely unraveled.
And it wasn't just losing a football match.
No, not at all. They fell apart on 3 totally different levels. We are talking about a tactical destruction on the grass, a total emotional and psychological collapse in the press room, and then, sadly, violent, fiery chaos on the streets of France.
It really is a masterclass in psychological dominance. I mean, when you read through the source material, the match reports, the post-game interviews, and the sociological data from the aftermath, it reads less like a sports story.
What does it read like then?
Honestly, it reads like a case study in how to systematically dismantle an opponent's entire identity.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really understand the chaos, I think we have to start with the tactics. We need to look at exactly how Spain stripped this Kylian Mbappe-led French team of their aura.
Yeah, that aura of invincibility was just gone.
Right. For a team that scored 16 goals to suddenly look entirely toothless, just incapable of stringing 2 passes together in the final third. That doesn't happen by accident.
No, it requires precision.
Exactly. So Spain won this game 2-0. They got an early penalty from Mikel Oyarzabal, and then Pedro Porro scored an absolutely beautiful 1-2 sequence with Dani Olmo.
Those goals were clinical, sure, but they are almost secondary to the underlying statistical dominance that Spain exerted.
The stats are wild.
The numbers are absolutely staggering. Listen to this. Spain created 3 big, clear-cut scoring chances in this match. France created 0.
Wait, 0? Actually
So
0?
Literally 0.
With arguably the most expensive dynamic forward line in the history of the sport.
0 big chances. And the expected goals, or XG, which for those who don't know is a metric that measures the actual quality and likelihood of a shot going in, it tells the exact same story.
What were the XG numbers?
Spain sat comfortably at 1.63 expected goals. France managed a dismal 0.30. Over the entire 90 minutes, they only forced the Spanish goalkeeper into 3 relatively routine saves.
Wow. And you could actually see the physical toll this was taking on the French players as the minutes ticked by. I mean, the total neutralization of their attack was visceral.
You could read it in their body language.
Totally. Ousmane Dembele, who is usually a massive threat on the wing, he was forced to drop so deep into his own half just to get a touch of the ball. He's basically playing as a defensive midfielder.
Which completely nullifies his pace.
Right. And Michael Olise, who had been this creative spark all tournament long, was completely invisible and eventually just subbed off.
He had no impact whatsoever.
And then there is Mbappe, the captain. He was left wandering the pitch, visibly searching for touches, drifting from the left side into the center, over to the right.
Just desperate to get involved.
Yeah, and he eventually got so frustrated that he picked up a yellow card just for nudging the Spanish goalkeeper, Unai Simon, who was taking his sweet time restarting play.
Yeah, a foul born entirely of irritation. I mean, it wasn't a tactical foul to stop a counterattack or anything. It was pure, unadulterated frustration bubbling over because he just couldn't get the ball.
But the real architect of that frustration, like the guy actually pulling the strings, was the Spanish midfielder Rodri.
Oh, Rodri was unbelievable.
His stats for this match don't even look real. Listen to this line. 82 touches, 59 successful passes, 4 tackles, a 100% success rate in aerial duels. And my absolute favorite stat, he was not dribbled past a single time.
Not once. Against the fastest, most dynamic forward line in world football, nobody could get past him.
In the source material, they talk a lot about Spain neutralizing France's transition football.
Right, which is France's bread and butter.
Exactly. Now, transition football is basically that terrifying moment when a team wins the ball back on defense and immediately explodes forward like a slingshot before the other team can even get set up. It's pure chaos.
And it's virtually impossible to defend if they get running.
But Rodri essentially deleted that from the game. But I want to push back on just saying he muted them, because that kind of implies he just turned down the volume.
How would you describe it?
Reading the tactical breakdowns, it felt more mechanical than that. It felt like Rodri was a highly advanced set of noise-canceling headphones, or like a circuit breaker. Every time the French electrical current tried to surge forward and start a fire, he just popped the breaker, the power cut out, and France had to start all over again in the dark.
What's fascinating here is the physical mechanism of how Spain achieved this. The circuit breaker analogy is spot on, but it wasn't just Rodri acting alone, you know. It was a collective strategy of what tactical analysts call spatial compression.
Spatial compression.
Right. France's entire identity relies on open space. They want the game to be stretched out. They want to win the ball deep and let the individual brilliance of a player like Mbappe sprint into 40 yards of empty grass.
Just a foot race they will always win.
Exactly. Spain knew this.
Well.
So instead of dropping back to defend, Spain pushed incredibly high and squeezed the spaces between their lines. They essentially took a massive sprawling pitch and shrank it down to the size of a phone booth around whatever French player happened to have the ball.
So they basically deny them the runway they need to take off.
They completely dismantled the runway. By controlling possession so meticulously and dictating the tempo entirely through Rodri, Spain ensured that whenever a French player did finally win the ball back, they were receiving it with 2 or 3 Spanish shirts instantly collapsing on them.
Swarming them.
Yeah, there was simply no open space to run into. Spain didn't just stop the French players from running, they starved them of the actual oxygen their tactical system needs to survive.
Man, when a team is being starved like that, when the game plan just isn't working and you can physically feel the pitch shrinking around you, the margin for error becomes practically zero.
It creates a pressure cooker.
Right. One mistake, one controversial moment, and the entire fragile structure just shatters. Which brings us to the 22nd minute. The spark that lit the fire.
The penalty decision.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the tactical frustration we just talked about instantly morphs into massive, game-altering controversy.
It was a very chaotic sequence.
It was. So the 19-year-old Spanish phenom, Lamine Yamal, is relentlessly chasing down this loose, bouncing ball. He sprints in from the blind side of French defender Lucas Digne.
Digne didn't even see him coming.
He has no idea Yamal is there. So Digne attempts to control the awkward ball with his chest and clear it blindly. But instead of volleying the ball into the stands, he kicks Yamal squarely in the torso.
Yeah, it was a brutal, heavy collision. And the referee, Ivan Barton from El Salvador, he doesn't hesitate for a second. He points straight to the penalty spot.
And the French players absolutely lose their minds. Mbappe is furious. He's waving his arms, screaming at the official. But if we dive into the VAR audio, the analysis from the Spanish refereeing expert Iturralde on Diario AS, we find out this wasn't actually a simple black and white call.
No, it was highly technical.
Right. Iturralde noted that in the split second before the kick, the ball may have actually struck Yamal's upper arm or bicep first, what he called a mano en attaque, or a handball in attack.
Which would invalidate the penalty.
Exactly. If Yamal handled it, the play should be dead, and the kick shouldn't matter. But because of how the rigid VAR protocol works, the check for the penalty, meaning the physical foul by Digne, had to be processed and set up first. So the call on the field stood.
The rigid bureaucracy of the rulebook essentially superseded the nuance of the build-up play.
Which is wild.
It is. But VAR checks clear and obvious errors regarding the penalty itself, and Digne undeniably kicked Yamal. The potential preceding handball became a secondary issue that just got lost in the procedural shuffle.
Well, that procedural shuffle led to the French manager, Didier Deschamps, experiencing a total post-match meltdown in front of the press camera.
Ooh, he was livid.
He was visibly seething.
Yeah.
He openly questioned if the referee Barton was even good enough to officiate a World Cup semifinal. But he didn't just blame the penalty itself. He cited an accumulation of things going against his team, even while, in the exact same breath, he begrudgingly admitted that Spain was a notch below on the technical level.
A very contradictory statement.
Right. So I have to push back on Deschamps here. When you look at the fact that France produced 0 big chances and held only 30% possession, is Deschamps really justified in blaming this vague accumulation of refereeing errors? Or is this just the classic sour grapes defense of a manager who knows deep down that his tactics were entirely dismantled?
Well, you have to view it through the lens of extreme psychological strain. Tactically, as we established, Deschamps was thoroughly outmanaged. Spain controlled the entire board.
They dictated everything.
They did. However, consider the psychological impact of a highly controversial penalty on a team that is already being suffocated. When your players spend 20 minutes just chasing shadows, completely unable to execute a single attacking sequence, their emotional baseline is already frayed.
Oh, they're totally on edge.
Exactly. So when a massive game-altering decision goes against them, especially one shrouded in procedural controversy like a potential missed handball, that frustration just compounds exponentially.
The boiling point.
In high-stakes environments, feeling powerless tactically is incredibly demoralizing. But feeling like you are also being arbitrarily wronged by the officials, that causes a complete psychological collapse. Deschamps' reaction, blaming the referee, is basically a defense mechanism.
So he's deflecting.
Yes, the perceived injustice becomes a convenient focal point, a scapegoat, really, to mask their underlying tactical impotence.
Well, that psychological collapse certainly did not go unnoticed back home. Because once the final whistle blew, the venue of the unraveling shifted. We moved from the pitch in Texas to the press rooms in Paris, where the French media began dissecting the corpse of this golden generation with absolute ruthlessness.
The French sporting press is historically very demanding, but the reaction to this specific defeat was uniquely brutal.
It really was. I was looking at the front pages from our sources, and it's just a bloodbath. L'Equipe, a publication that is already famous for its incredibly harsh grading system, published this giant full-page photo of a forlorn, exhausted Mbappe with the headline, "Fallen Star." Yeah. And their player ratings. Out of 10, not a single French player scored above a 5. Lucas Digne, Ousmane Dembele, and Michael Olise all received scathing 2s out of 10.
To put that in context for you, a 2 out of 10 in L'Equipe is essentially the publication stating that you were an active detriment to your team.
Like you were playing for the other side.
Basically, it means they think you shouldn't have even been on the pitch.
And the captain, Mbappe, along with the manager, Didier Deschamps, they only got 3s. Le Parisien didn't hold back either, calling the match a rude awakening against the Spanish Armada.
The wording is so dramatic.
Then the consequences of this fallout are very real. Deschamps is stepping down after 13 years in charge. I mean, think about that legacy. This is a guy who won the 2018 World Cup, reached the 2022 final, and now his era is unceremoniously over.
End of an era, truly.
But amidst all the harsh ratings and the headlines, the quote that really stood out to me came from the French midfielder Ryan Cherki. He said, "We lost to ourselves. The only team capable of eliminating us was ourselves."
That is a very telling quote.
But let me ask you to analyze those media ratings for a second. Are 2 out of 10 ratings for some of the best athletes on the planet actually rooted in tactical reality? Did they play that poorly? Or is the French media acting like a jilted lover, lashing out in emotional pain because their massive expectations were shattered?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the low ratings are undeniably punitive. They aren't analytical.
They're emotional?
Highly emotional. They are a manifestation of a betrayed national expectation. You have to understand the massive, almost suffocating weight placed on this specific French squad. They weren't just expected to compete in this tournament, they were expected to dominate it entirely.
Right. They had a standard of perfection.
Exactly. They are a golden generation living in the towering shadow of their own past glories. When a team with that much talent doesn't just lose, but looks entirely devoid of inspiration and fight, the media reaction reflects the immense pressure and disappointment of the entire nation.
It's basically an emotional purge for the country.
It is. But going back to Turkey's quote, that is the most revealing piece of evidence we have from the inside. We lost to ourselves.
Yeah, it stuck with me.
Because that is the sound of an internal psychological collapse. It's a frank admission that the tactical structure failed, the emotional regulation failed, and ultimately the belief in their own invincibility was shattered. Spain didn't just beat them on the scoreboard. Spain held up a mirror and forced France to watch themselves fall apart in real time.
Wow. And unfortunately, that unraveling didn't stop in the locker room or on the front pages of newspapers. The frustration of this defeat spilled over into the chaotic reality of the streets, leading to nationwide violence in France.
Right, and this is where the narrative fundamentally shifts from a sporting event to a very complex sociological event.
Exactly. According to the reports, immediately after the 2-0 defeat, violent riots erupted in several major French cities. We're talking about severe property destruction, vehicles being set on fire, and intense physical clashes with the police.
It escalated very quickly.
Now, social media immediately started mocking the unrest. Users were calling it protest football and jokingly suggesting they rename the Paris airport to FIFA Final, since that's the only way the French team was ever going to get there.
The online mockery is an easy way to dismiss the violence as just angry, irrational sports fans acting out. But the pattern documented by researchers in the source material is far more deeply rooted.
It's a bizarre, recurring pattern that really forces you to pause. Because they didn't just riot when they lost to Spain, fans rioted after France's quarterfinal win over Morocco earlier in this very tournament.
Yes, after a victory.
And even wilder, the sources point out that back in May of 2026, when Paris Saint-Germain won the Champions League final, 75 different French cities saw what were officially classified as celebration riots.
Which is an oxymoron if I've ever heard one.
Right, and that specific instance resulted in 890 arrests, 219 injuries, and tragically, 1 death. Now, just to be clear to you listening, we aren't taking any political sides here. We are just looking at what the researchers and authorities have documented.
Right, just looking at the sociological data.
So what does this all mean? Does it make any logical sense to riot and burn cars when your team loses? A&D riot and burn cars when your team wins? Is this violence actually about a 2-0 loss to Spain? Or is football just the match being dropped into a powder keg that was already completely soaked in gasoline?
This raises an important question about the intersection of sports and society. When sociologists and researchers look at the underlying causes of these events, it becomes crystal clear that the match itself is merely a catalyst. It is absolutely a powder keg scenario.
What's fueling the powder keg, according to the data?
The reports identify several compounding, non-sporting factors that fuel this unrest. You have the presence of volatile groups looking for any excuse to mobilize against authority. You have heavy-handed policing tactics like the immediate deployment of tear gas, which rapidly escalate already tense crowd situations.
Yeah, that definitely adds fuel to the fire.
And most importantly, you have profound, deep-seated socioeconomic frustrations.
So we're talking about things that have been brewing long before the opening whistle.
Decades before. Specifically, researchers point to high youth unemployment and severe social marginalization, particularly in the dense suburbs surrounding these major French cities.
Right.
What analysts observe is that football, because of its massive cultural scale and tribal nature, acts as a societal lightning rod. It provides a socially acceptable, or at least a highly visible and predictable excuse for marginalized groups to take to the streets.
Because everyone is already gathered for the game anyway.
Precisely. When you are a young person feeling invisible, disenfranchised, or just ignored by the state on a daily basis, a major football match guarantees one thing. The eyes of the entire nation and the heavy presence of the police force are suddenly on you and your community.
It's an automatic spotlight.
It is. The extreme emotion of the game, whether it is the collective euphoria of a PSG championship win or the crushing, humiliating disappointment of the national team's semifinal loss, simply unlatches the gate. It provides the adrenaline and the crowd cover for broader, simmering societal tensions to just explode into the open.
So the scoreboard is essentially irrelevant to the people throwing the barricades.
For the core groups initiating the severe unrest, the actual result of the football match is largely secondary. What matters is the opportunity for expression. The event provides the cover of a massive crowd and the heightened emotional state required to tip a gathering over the edge into violence.
That is an incredibly heavy perspective, but it forces you to step back and look at the entire landscape of this event. If we summarize the incredible contrast at the heart of this deep dive, It is a story of absolute control versus a total catastrophic loss of control.
A perfect dichotomy.
On the pitch, you had Spain dictating every single blade of grass, using tactical structures and players like Rodri to squeeze the life, the space, and the tempo out of the game. And in stark contrast, you had France completely unraveling at every conceivable level.
An unraveling that started with the players losing their tactical discipline, right? Which then bled into losing their emotional composure and arguing with the referee over a VAR protocol, which then transferred to the media, delivering vindictive, emotional ratings to their own fallen stars, and ultimately culminated in marginalized communities using the defeat to ignite violent riots across the nation's streets.
It's a domino effect.
Yeah.
And for you listening, whether you are a massive football fan or you've literally never watched a match in your life, I think the core takeaway here applies everywhere.
Absolutely.
What we saw is that in highly pressurized environments, it doesn't really matter if you are navigating a high-stakes corporate boardroom, playing in a World Cup semifinal, or just existing in a tense, marginalized society frustration compounds.
It always does.
It builds, it looks for an outlet, and it eventually explodes. If you don't find a way to dictate the tempo of your own game, to control your own space and your own reactions, someone else, like Spain, is going to do it for you. And the results of losing that control are devastating.
It really is a profound lesson in the architecture of pressure. Spain built a meticulous structure to contain and weaponize it. France allowed that exact same pressure to shatter them from the inside out.
Which brings us back to where we started, looking at the wreckage of what was supposed to be the game of the decade. We constantly use the cliche that sports are a mirror reflecting society.
We hear it all the time.
Right. But when we look at how a simple 90-minute football match has the power to serve as the catalyst for nationwide riots, it leaves us with a lingering question to ponder long after the stadium lights go out.
And what's that?
Are sports simply reflecting our existing societal fractures, or by giving us these massive, highly emotional tribal battlegrounds, are they actively widening them?
That is definitely something to carefully consider the next time the world gathers to watch a game.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.